Hello and welcome to Cape Ann Artwaves 2022 season. Artwaves is a member program of 1623 Studios here in Gloucester, Massachusetts. We kicked off this program in March of 2020. Artwaves delves into the working lives and the stories of our artists that have lived or worked here in Cape Ann. My name is Jacqueline Ganem DeFalco, and I'm co-hosting and co-producing this show with Christine Fisher, an artist colleague who today will appear to you as an artist. We're very excited to announce that Artwaves has received nearly 14,000 views on YouTube since we began, and we've interviewed nearly 70 artists, which is very exciting. Artwaves is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors: Prince Insurance Agency, M. Christine Fisher, visual artist, Compass Realty and Martha Anger, real estate advisor, Cape Ann Savings Bank, Protective Packaging, and the Common Crow Natural Market. We'd like to recognize our musicians, Steve Lacey and Pat Verga, who provided us with original music for the show, and our marketing partners, 1623 Studios and C Arts, who have really supported us throughout the show from the very beginning. And we can't do the show without them, and so appreciate everything. So today, as I mentioned, we have reversed roles, as we also did in the last episode. And so today we're going to have a fabulous conversation with Christine Fisher, who is so well known here in the arts community. But in a very unique way today, we're going to meet her as an artist. So creating and sharing imagery that stimulates the senses is Christine's strategy for everyday living. It's the root of her inspiration, working as a contemporary visual artist in mixed media and photography. Christine's mixed media work is deeply influenced by the coastal environs of living here on Cape Ann, the sea's rhythm, along with many years of working with global design leader Herman Miller, reflect in the graphic simplicity of her work. She's drawn to sculptural elements, bold forms, and graphic composition. With her camera, she enjoys capturing a sense of place by weaving a narrative that focuses on the discovery of off-the-grid locations. She's especially drawn to the details. These are the many moments that our eyes often do not see. Christine is a lifelong champion of the arts and culture. She's a charter member of the National Museum for Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C., in addition to her role as co-producer of Cape Ann Artwaves, and also a sponsor, may I add, she currently serves on the leadership committee of the experimental group of Rockport Art Association and Museum, and has served as a trustee on multiple boards, in addition to having consulted with the Peabody Essex Museum in institutional giving. After retiring from Herman Miller, she earned an advanced certificate in fundraising management from Boston University, followed by taking the helm as the executive director of Marblehead Arts Association here in Marblehead, Massachusetts, for a few years. And then she redirected her energy into pursuing her own artistic path, which is what we're going to talk about today. Christine exhibits with galleries on Boston's North Shore and will be curating her fourth show in 2023 at the Jane Deering Gallery here in Gloucester. So I am really pleased now to welcome Christine as a guest of Cape Ann Artwaves today. Christine, I'm turning this over to you. Now, thank you. I am so excited for the world to hear this story because it's really the first time you're telling it.
It is the first time that I'm telling it.
So you got to just start at the beginning of your art journey and how the early days of your life influenced you and gave you such an appetite for the arts that you have sustained throughout your entire life.
Well, first off, I want to thank you for that lovely introduction. That was very generous. So thank you. Thank you. Art making has always been an adventure for me. It's truly one of my red threads. From getting dirty as a young toddler, I'm sure my mom had to hose me down when I came home, making mud pies, to finger painting, to designing and making jewelry using flip tops from cans in the 1960s. It was the Twiggy era. And I painted these flip top psychedelic colors. They were really fun. And I think I sold them for like $10 a pop, if you can believe. Very enterprising as a young person. I designed clothing. I designed and made a limited series of copper enamel jewelry. And I'm showing an image right now. This pair of earrings I discovered only last week. It was such a big aha. I had not seen them in years and years. So it was perfect, right? I mean, it was meant to be. But making art made me happy as a kid. And honestly, I just wasn't good at anything else. And in our home, arts mattered. Our mom placed a premium on handmade gifts and would enlist all of the kids to make holiday cards. From the time that I was very young, I remember having an acute sense of place. I was very aware of the art on the walls, the furniture. I'd constantly rearrange the furniture. I really enjoyed making vignettes. Mm-hmm. As a young one, I had dyslexia. And so I think it triggered me to further develop my visual skills. I remember being over the moon when my parents gave me interior design books, like at the age of 7.
Wow.
I just devoured them, and kudos to them for recognizing my eye and nurturing that at a young age. My mom was big on packing the 4 kids into the station wagon and traveling from the burbs to downtown Washington, D.C., where we would just have our run of the National Gallery of Art. You know, we're talking about the late 50s, early 60s. There just wasn't the concern about security like there is today. Mm-hmm. So she would just let us run loose, and then we'd get back together and we'd talk about the art that really impressed us and why. So it was kind of my home away from home. Those were early seeds. I was also an art minor in college with a focus in ceramics. So those early mud pies really bore out in my case. Also at a young age, and you mentioned this in my intro, I became a charter member of the National Museum for Women in the Arts, which is located in Washington, D.C. And I lived in D.C. in my 20s. And I'm still active with their Massachusetts chapter. It's a gem of a museum. It's closed right now due to renovations. But also, Jackie, as you know, Rick and I have been big champions of Cape Ann artists. And we recognize art as being really essential and important to our sense of well-being, right?
Absolutely.
So we just love celebrating Cape Ann artists as well as artists from other locations. But throughout my adult life, I mean, I worked for 35 years full-time. So throughout my adult life, I've always enjoyed photography, and I've used it as my means of artistic expression, and created a series of note cards called Pack Your Bags.
I know, I'm so excited. I pulled one out today. So this one here is Monhegan Island, which I was so excited about. And of course, I have some other fabulous note cards here that I can show. This was Annisquam Yacht Club. This was photography.
Yep.
And then this one will come up later on from travels, you know, so we'll talk about this mysterious, lovely spot where you did some fantastic photography. And I actually have a piece from that collection up on the wall, but it's too high to show today.
So, you are so good to keep these pieces. I'm totally impressed.
Well, you know how it's tough to part with them. I've parted with some of them, but they're so beautiful.
I love it. That's very, very kind of you. But if I pull back and I think about myself more abstractly, honestly, foundationally, I'm a designer. And I think of design as a verb, from making life choices to the making of place, to food, to art, to fashion, you know, all of it.
And I've been lucky enough to see you through many of those things, so I can attest to all of them. But I want to go back to a little bit to the influence of your career in contract interiors with Herman Miller, because that, as well as the board work you've done, the work you've done curating shows, has definitely influenced your art practice. But I'd like to find out from your perspective just how that's happened and sort of where you came out in terms of your style.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a great question. I would have to say that my earlier career with global designer Herman Miller was really foundational, both from a design perspective as well as a confidence perspective. I was always on the business development side of things, and I learned how to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I'm a little uncomfortable right now, to be honest, but Here we go. But it's all about taking risks, right? And it helped me not only with my art practice, but also with getting my art out there. I worked across the company, working with designers from around the world, as well as marketing and sales teams. So it was, for me, the perfect marriage between business and art making. And, truly at the end of the day, I'm a hybrid. It also had a tremendous impact on my sense of design, to answer your question. And I'm showing an image right now, an abstract, which I'm happy to say hangs in a lovely home here on Cape Ann. I tend to favor bolder contemporary compositions that reflect structure and movement, that are rhythmic and sculptural, as you mentioned before. But after leaving Herman Miller, I consulted with the Peabody Essex Museum, as you mentioned, in institutional giving. And at the same time, I returned to school, returned to college, to BU, to get a certificate in fundraising management. And also at the same time, I was serving as a trustee on the board of the Society for the Encouragement of the Arts, our beloved partner, as well as the Rockport Art Association and Museum. So it was a very, very busy time in my life. And after I jumped off of those activities, I became the executive director of the Marblehead Arts Association. It was a short stint, just over 2 years. But what was fabulous about that experience is that it really helped me to further hone my curatorial eye. And I became so immersed in the mechanics of what it takes to put on an exhibition. At the time, the MAA had, I think, 6 galleries. They might have expanded. We were churning exhibitions every 6 weeks. Right. So I'm very grateful for that skill development. And it really kind of brings us full circle. We never know, really, do we?
No.
How one experience is going to inform another, right?
Exactly. And it was through that experience that you met so many fantastic artists who some of you brought forward on Cape Ann Art Waves, some who have influenced you in the direction you've gone in. Some have become good friends, right? So there's just, a wonderful continuous outpouring from those experiences, which leads me really to the next question about the actual influences, in your inspiration to sort of get you to, where you are today now, with some shows behind you, some shows ahead of you, and completely immersed now in the art world.
Yeah. It is my life right now.
It really is.
I should say a big part of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's been obviously some specific things that have led up to this point. So
That's right. Well, let's talk about some of the themes that have really triggered inspiration for me. And I would have to say traveling, and you're a fellow traveler, so you can really appreciate this. You're very adventurous too. But traveling to remote locations is really a big one. And foundational for me was having spent my high school years in Bangkok, Thailand. And this is during the 1960s, when Thailand was truly, truly a third world country. I think my parents were very brave to pack up the family and move over there. So I learned how to lean into adventuring. And I also learned how to really absorb the sensory experience. And both of those experiences have impacted my work. I'm showing an image right now of an elephant that Rick and I stumbled upon. My better half, Rick Kringle, and I were traveling to Thailand. This is many, many years later. And we're hiking up in the Northern Triangle in Chiang Rai. And we hired a guide because, of course, we were not familiar with the terrain. We'd been hiking for a while. And all of a sudden, we're hiking down to a stream and we discover this elephant. And the elephant was getting a bath by its trainer. It was truly, truly a magical moment. I would also say a transformational moment for me was being introduced to this lovely jewel of an island, very remote. It's a Sicilian Italian island way down by Tunisia. My husband was invited to help restore a 400-year-old olive mill into a state-of-the-art vacation home. And I've been fortunate to travel there several times. Rick actually went back and forth for like 10 years. And together we would pack our cameras, and when time permitted, we'd be out and about photographing this beautiful, beautiful undiscovered place. In 2019, Rick and I had a show at the Jane Deering Gallery, which we curated, titled Moments Redefined. And you were there. You came to our wonderful opening. It was just, it was really great fun. So we were showcasing images that spanned over a 10-year period of time. And that whole experience, being on that island and going multiple times, really reintroduced me to the joy and the nuance of photography.
Yes. And you could just see how peaceful that experience is through the photographs and, some of the other things that came out of there. It's so different, right, than our busy lives every day.
It's very agricultural, very, very remote, very hard to get to.
Yes.
You have to be very determined to get there.
Right.
Talk about adventuring. But there's a few pieces from the Moments Redefined show, from Jane Deering's show, that I'd like to share. One is this wonderful invitation, which really illustrates just, how beautiful these rolling vineyards are on the island, which is well known for its dessert wine. The second image is of a building, a home, on this lovely island. And here I'm illustrating the Arabic influence of the roof line. These roof lines are just spectacular. I mean, where else are you going to see that, especially for an Italian island? Mm-hmm. And then lastly, Rick and I at the show, we had such a good time at our own opening.
I know you did. It was a big party, a small space, and people spilling out into the streets.
It was great fun. I'm so glad that you were there. And hopefully so many of our listeners today also participated. A great buzz, a lot of red dots. It was very reaffirming for us. And also around that time, just a little bit earlier, I had been introduced to mixed media by Susan Getz McPhail, who is such a talented artist and a very enthusiastic teacher. She is the queen of techniques. And I'm showing you a piece right now that I did in 2019 called Dancing Heart. My husband was going through a heart issue. And so it came out of that space and now hangs in a friend's home in Greater Boston. But my Asian influence really comes through, I believe, in this piece. And of course, the colors speak for themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And just as a side note, I never seem to be able to do just a one-off piece. Yes. That I do multiple.
A series.
And so this is one that was in the series. Another big theme that has triggered inspiration for me is our garden, which Rick and I work very devotedly. It's a sanctuary for us. I'm showing a shot right now of our front yard. This is last year when we had rain, certainly not this year.
Yes, right.
But we enjoy all the colors and the texture, and watching the light throughout the day change the feeling of our garden. So we don't have to go very far, which is great. And I love trying to capture unexpected moments. And you might remember about a year ago, we had this terrific storm. It was late October. We had overnight big winds. I want to say 50, 60 miles an hour. I mean, it's amazing that we all didn't get swept off of our perches. And so I'm showing a shot right now that I took the morning after. I went downstairs, went into our living room, which overlooks a quarry. And this was the residue from the storm, which was on the glass.
And it's just spectacular, this photo. I have to tell you that when I first looked at it, I could not tell if it was a painting or a photograph that was touched up, but you really captured it beautifully. I mean, it's just gorgeous.
Thank you. Someday I have to print that. I've got to work with that a little bit more.
Yeah. But I think this natural environment for you just continues to be a theme, right? And throughout, it's sort of like you might take a photograph and then that could potentially turn into something else.
Yeah, that's really well said. And that's a perfect segue. You and I are crack interviewers, right?
No.
That's a perfect segue, Jackie. We are so fortunate to live in such a beautiful area. I mean, Cape Ann, so many beautiful beaches and coves. And I have to say, it was especially comforting during the height of COVID, Rick and I would take, almost daily walks. And the comfort that we would get from these walks was, really restorative. And they inspired me to create a whole series, quite a deep series, at least 14 to 20 pieces, called Just Breathe. That was what I titled my series. And I'm going to show you a couple of images. I invited Donna Castleton. She and I did a show. She also was working feverishly during COVID. Her collection was called Just Awry. And so Awry, Just Breathe. I mean, it kind of sums up the pandemic, right?
Yes, it really does. Everything went awry, that's for sure.
Everything went awry. And my answer to that was just breathe. Let's just just exhale a little bit. So we had this show that I curated at the Jane Deering Gallery, and I'm showing a couple of images here from the show. These are all pieces that are made of from a monotype print. The pieces were made on a gelatin press made of rice paper. I created a lot of fun with the color. I do actually want to back up a minute too and say that the shot of Pebble Beach, which I show right now, really, I think, sets the table for some of the imagery and the influence of color. This was one of our walks. Pebble Beach is a beautiful beach in Rockport, Mass, and one of our favorites. So the imagery that and the work that came out of Just Breathe was inspired by these walks, and you can see the coloration. And, at the end of the day, it's really up to the viewer, right? And their engagement with the piece. And that's really, where the magic happens, because it's so different for all of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the one thing that's so interesting to me as, a friend and a fellow professional and a fellow artist is that the way we make art, right, is often so different than the way we live our lives. And so, of course, I know you as an extremely organized person and someone who is usually, just right on the money. And when you make art, is it the same for you, or are you different in the way that you approach your art practice and the process? I thought you should comment on that because
well, thank you. That's a great lead in. No, I go rogue.
Okay. A side we don't often get to see.
I mean, you're absolutely right. In my real life, so to speak, when I'm not in my studio, I tend to be quite organized and quite buttoned up. And I had to be. I mean, for so many years working full time, and I was traveling a ton. So, that was how I organized my life. And when I come into my studio, I really give myself permission to create chaos. And I'm filming right now in my studio. I've got to give a big shout out to Rick Krengle, who designed this beautiful space for me in our house. And you are right. The work behind me is work that has come from a number of different series, which we'll talk about. But, in life, I feel that there is so much noise, right? There's just so much noise from, politics to, what's going on with us emotionally. So creating art is my way of offsetting the noise. It really is. I'm drawn to the adventure of art making. I love the discovery of creating. I never know where I'm going to get what I'm going to get. I'm attracted to those fun, little serendipitous, unexpected moments. Now, that's not to say that making art isn't challenging, especially for me when I get going. I have kind of a push-pull response. I'm eager to get in there and get my hands dirty and get started, but I'm also, concerned about, geez, what is this going to turn into? Do I know what I'm doing? Do I know where I'm going? And the answer is no. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know where I'm going. So that is part of also the release, right? I mean, that's part of kind of giving into the piece and letting the piece tell me what it wants to be. It's a process that kind of, moves through me, if you will. I internalize a feeling or an experience or something visual, and I try to translate that on paper, so it's very expressive. I enjoy working with a lot of different materials. There's a ton of problem solving. I toss out much more work than I ever keep. So, I'm constantly learning through the process. And one of the tools that I use that has been so helpful for me to get perspective is my little iPhone. And I take lots of shots of work in process. And I'll flip pieces around. I'll flip them upside down. I'll flip them on their side. I'll add layers. I'll take layers away. And it's through that perspective that I learn about what this piece wants to be, And it requires me, the art making, to be truly present. And I think that's one of the best things that I get out of art making. I do thrive on the chaos and being able to walk away from it. When my husband, Rick, comes up and looks at my studio, he's just, he's aghast at how crazy messy it can be. There's a wonderful quote that I keep trying to switch up on my website, but I haven't found anything better. And I think it really sums me up. The creative process is a cocktail of instinct, skill, culture, and a highly creative feverishness, by Francis Bacon.
Well, I love that. And I think what it does is it completely whets our appetite to look at some more work and really find out, as you've totally immersed yourself over the last couple of years. And you were involved in some shows that were quite interesting, like 2020 Vision. Let's look at some art and let's sort of see what's come out of all the chaos that you've been talking about, because we can't tell all of that when we see the final piece.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I've been busy. As you know, I've mentioned 2 shows with the Jane Deering Gallery. Last year, I curated a group show, 2020 Vision, invited 5 other artists, to include Rick Krangle, my better half, who's a phenomenal artist, sculptor, along with Susan Guest McPhail, I've mentioned, who is just, the queen of mixed media, Donna Castleton, Kat Masella, Terry Del Percio Piemonte. It was a really lovely, accomplished group of artists. And it was my honor to be able to pull this group together. I'm showing you a couple of pieces from that show. The first one, which you encouraged me, Jackie, to include in this interview, is titled Resilience. And it was made during the COVID years, made in 2021. It's almost 6 feet high. I think what makes this piece rather fun is just the unexpected kind of layout of it, if you will. I made all the papers, some are hand painted and just distressed with different treatments, and other papers were made on a gelatin press. So it was a lot of fun for me to do. And let's see, I want to show also a small little piece that I think packs a big punch. The title of it is Mighty. And it's only 6 by 6, which is one of the reasons why I named it Mighty. I think it's a loud piece for its small size, right? And it really reflects, again, my Asian influence, which I can't seem to get away from. It's just something that really kind of comes through me, if you will. Also in that show was a piece that Rick and I did jointly. We enjoyed our first collaboration. We named our piece It's Complicated. I'm showing you the piece in its entirety right now, the finished piece. And then I have a number of process shots. Rick in 2020 came into the house with 27 puzzle pieces that were a very tight puzzle. And he had cut them out on his bandsaw in high density cardboard. And he said, here, do something with this. And I remember it wasn't anything that we had talked about. I remember being so taken back by it. I've got a shot of what this puzzle looked like. But it was a wonderful challenge, right? And so I did all the surface treatments, which consisted of silver leaf and monotype prints, again, from the gel press, painting directly on the high density cardboard. And at the end of the day, you can see some of these iterations. At the end of the day, I'm showing you an image of this piece hanging with Mighty in the 2020 Vision show. I thought the two really played off of each other very well.
And you really you've mentioned Rick a couple of times, but in so many ways, he has been a big inspiration. Has not?
Absolutely. Oh,
I
gosh,
mean,
yeah.
my goodness, we've experienced Rick on so many levels, even in our Wearable Art Runway show with his incredible wooden dress. But it just doesn't surprise me at all that he would walk into the house with a bunch of puzzle pieces for you.
And a directive to do something with them.
Right, exactly.
He is my better half.
Sure. But there are other things that influenced you, and I know you wanted to comment on your love of the sea and how that's been a huge influence.
Yes, our love of the sea, my love of the sea. Again, it goes back to these wonderful walks that Rick and I take. And this piece that I'm showing you right now, what I really appreciate about this piece is the texture of the water. Mm-hmm. I just think the texture is, very, very playful. And it spawned a series called Float Series. And I'm showing you 2 images from Float Series, which I also introduced in 2021 at the 2020 Vision Show. Mm-hmm. These pieces are meant to evoke being underwater or being in the water. They're full of rhythm and movement. They're made of ink, charcoal, acrylic, and watercolor. I used actually tissue paper to create the watercolor.
Mm. Yeah. And these are this marvelous blue color.
Yes.
Which appears in, you actually have a lot of blue, I noticed.
I know, it's true. And I never wear blue.
I know, it's so unusual for you. So, but it comes out a lot in the art. I see it across the board in all the photos that we've looked at today.
It's really true. It's my way of celebrating blue.
Yes, exactly.
There's one other piece in the series that I want to talk about because it's very special for me. And that's a piece that I made this year. It was one of the last 2 pieces that I made, the Float Series. It's called Frolicking Seas. Mm-hmm. And I made this on the anniversary of my late father's birthday. He died many years ago. And my father loved to sail. Unfortunately, in his lifetime, he didn't do enough sailing. And I was thinking of him that day and made this piece from all the material that I just talked about before. But it's full of motion and rhythm, and I think he would have enjoyed it quite a bit.
Well, now we have to come up to the most recent work, and this past summer where we came sort of hopefully out of the pandemic, right? I think we're creeping out of the pandemic, but it was a bit of a release. So maybe you could comment on what you've worked on most recently.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Jackie. I created a series called To Flourish. And I'm showing a piece right now that really illustrates the fun that I had creating unexpected color layering. I love combining colors that maybe we wouldn't think would go together. Mm-hmm. I also love working with negative space. And, one of my signature techniques, which you saw with Mighty, and I think you saw it also with Dancing Heart, and you see it again in this series, is really coming off the edges. I love using the edges in that way. And there was a big show at the Cove Gallery this past summer. And I had 3 of those images on display. That was with fellow experimental group artists. It was a fabulous show, very well attended.
And is that what's behind you?
Yes. I should say that the original inspiration of this piece was a wonderful artist who passed away last fall, who I had the opportunity to interview, Jackie Harrington, internationally recognized botanical artist. And Jackie was, just marvelous at what she did. And Nella Lush, who is the founder of the experimental group with the Rockport Art Association Museum, came up with the idea of doing a tribute show in Jackie's honor.
Yes.
So the To Flourish series was really a nod to Jackie, but of course I can't do just one. So
right. Of course not. But I do love the photograph of you with the work because I would expect, you're perfectly dressed and styled to go along with the photographs. So I'm not sure which came first, but it's typical of you, Christine.
Well, thank you. I'll take it. I'll take it. Thank you. Thank you.
I love that. I love that. Well, speaking of, because you have mentioned, Susan Guest McPhail, and you mentioned Jackie, you obviously are a person that loves to learn and pays a lot of attention to what's out there, but who's gone in front of you. And at the same time, of course, looking forward. But I know that you like to, sort of learn from other artists. Tell us about those folks that you want to recognize today.
Oh, there's several people. I refer to myself as an emerging artist, and there have been several folks that have really made a big influence on me. And I do want to tick them off and thank them briefly. First off, I want to thank the late Charlie Mavalli, who was a lovely friend, internationally recognized painter as well as teacher. Charlie and I really connected, believe it or not, on the topic of legacy, iconic industrial design, which is what Herman Miller is all about. And he sponsored me for the board seat at the Rockport Art Association and Museum. So Charlie and I served together there. I also want to give a shout out again to Susan Guest McPhail. I took a number of classes with her shortly after I stepped down from Marblehead Arts Association. She's a real treasure. I want to thank Nella Lush. Nella is the founder and leader of the experimental group, also with the Rockport Art Association and Museum. Nella has created a culture of learning and community with this group, and there's probably at least 150 members. I want to thank gallerist Jane Deering. My goodness, Jane is a wonderful friend to artists. She is, so savvy. Her gallery is absolutely stunning. And I have felt so grateful to have 2 shows there. Hopefully have another show in 2023. I want to thank Ruth Mordecai, who I find so inspirational, just the way she leads her life and also her work. I want to thank Don Goravette. Don is a master printmaker, internationally recognized with work all over the world. And he has been very encouraging to Rick and to me. We're very appreciative, and his enthusiasm is just infectious. Lastly, and you hit on it, I want to thank my better half, Rick Pringle. Rick is, he is such an example for me. And, he is somebody who will tell it to me straight. He doesn't mess around. And I really appreciate that. We all need that, right?
Right.
My biggest champion all the way around. I want to thank family and friends, who have supported my work. You, Jackie, who have, collected my cards and kept them. Then the piece you acquired when Rick and I had our show at the Jane Deering Gallery. And I'm just very appreciative to all of the friends who have given me constructive feedback and have acquired my work. And lastly, I want to thank our artists who have been guests on our show, because I have learned so much from our rich conversations, particularly around process, et cetera.
Yeah. No, it has been a learning experience for both of us. And, with respect to people like Jane Deering, yes, and all of our local galleries, I agree. We really have to recognize them and also support them, in any way that we can.
That's right.
So speaking of exciting things coming up, you always have something up your sleeve, Christine. So what's next? What's next?
Well, I hope to have a show again at the Jane Deering Gallery, which I will curate in 2023. This will coincide with Gloucester's 400 anniversary. So that's very exciting. The details of that need to be fleshed out, but I'm looking forward to creating a body of work to support that show. And then this fall, a very unexpected opportunity has occurred. I've been invited by a national furniture retailer very contemporary with a focus in mid-century. The name of the retailer is West Elm, and they specialize in total interiors, and they've invited me to be their pop-up artist. So I'm very excited about that. Who knows where that's going to lead, right?
I don't know, but you have totally come full circle. I mean,
that is true.
That is where you want to be. You want to be because you are walking and talking and living and breathing design, as far as I can tell.
That's that's so well said. That's so well said. And as you mentioned before, I'm a lifelong learner. Yes. And, I believe in taking classes, whether they be online or in person. Going to museums is for somebody else, their church or their temple. It's really where I go to feel comfort and restored, and also to learn from other artists. So Jackie, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we actually want to wrap up shortly.
Yes.
But I'd love for you to, I guess share with the audience anything else that, because, so many of us have reached this point a little bit later in our lives where we have the privilege of making art, right? Mm-hmm. So I'd love for you to sort of share your thoughts about that.
That's a really good way to sum it up. And I would have used that word privilege as well. I mean, I feel very blessed, especially after, having the career path that I did, to be able to now have this time in my life to be able to create art. My advice would be to honestly just get out there and experiment, just take chances, give yourself permission to take some risks. And I need to reinforce that for myself as well. So I'm sharing this advice. I need to give it to myself as well. And to just get cracking, I need to get cracking. I've got to create a whole new collection for this year. So, I mean, that's kind of a constant beat, mm-hmm. right? And in closing here, I do have two images that I want to share. One is reminds me to feel the joy that I did when I was a younger person at the age of 5 or 6. And this is my younger self. And I get such a kick out of this photograph. I only recently rediscovered it, but this kid loved getting dirty and making art. That's all I can say. She was totally into the experience of it. And you can see the little water spout thing. I mean, this is the late 50s. I think I wanted to mimic, one of those 50 gals with their ponytails. It was my way of doing it. And then fast forward, I've got my own self-portrait here that I did a few years ago.
Excellent. Well, that's great. I love it. I love it. And I have to say, the one thing that's exciting from my perspective, because I've been at your shows, as you mentioned earlier, you've had a lot of red dots. And, can't forget that there's a big excitement and I would say inspiration in selling art. Right.
There really is. Yeah. And I'm a gal of the marketplace, really, with respect to my background. So I love creating art, as you know, and and then ideally when work, is acquired and is hanging in someone's home, it's, so very fulfilling. Right. But at the end of the day, it's about having fun. I feel very grateful to have arrived where I am. Mm-hmm. And I think about Susan Guest McPhail, who is always saying, hey, just have fun with it. Right. It's all about participating. At the end of the day, whether you sell or you don't sell, it's about participating. And how fortunate that you and I live in this beautiful area of Cape Ann, this wonderful community that is just thriving with creatives. So
absolutely. Well, we want to know how to reach you, find out about your shows, see the work that's potentially available for sale. And the best way to do that is?
Yeah, so my URL is Christine with a K, ChristineFisher.com. I do post on Instagram, which is Christine Fisher Visual Artist, and that's also connected to my Facebook. And with respect to my pop-ups that I'll be doing this fall in the greater Boston area with West Elm, I'll be putting notifications on both Instagram and Facebook. So thank you, Jackie. What a pleasure. We had fun.
We did have a lot of fun, Christine. And so now we have to wrap up, but I'd like to really thank our viewers today and let you know that you'll be able to obviously see this on local 1623 Studios channel, also on their YouTube channel, and it will be promoted on Facebook and Twitter and featured on the upcoming C Arts eBlast. And just tune in, as I said, to Channel 12 and share this generously when you see it. Thanks again to our sponsors, including Christine Fisher, visual artist, and all of the other sponsors who have made this show possible, C-Arts 1623, and our musicians. And that wraps us up for today's
Hey, that's well said. Thank you all. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Jackie.
Hey, Christine.